Okay, so in this hopefully last tutorial, let's review over the render settings. So you get a quality image render sequence. Let's go to Arnold, open Arnold render view. Okay, and under here, render cam shape. Let's hit render. Why is it rendering at that? Okay, good. Now we have a problem. Let's go over this. It's rendering at 1240 by 1350. It's rendering it huge because I had it set to a large image before. So in case for whatever reason you did the same thing, let's go under view, test resolution 100%. Okay, again that's view, test resolution 100%. Now it's going to render at 1920 by 1080. Our final output settings that we did previously. And if you notice, it's black, completely black, because I'll explain why. The reason why is that in the previous tutorials we made the layers and we hid our lights, our area lights, and we hid our sky dome light. And we also made the ground a template, which also makes it that you cannot see it in the render. I'm gonna change this from T to R. Okay, but if you notice, it's still dark. We don't see anything. That's because Maya and Arnold, we need to update the full scene. And there we have it. And we're gonna want 1:1, which is gonna be huge. This is your final render image size. You know, and also you can expect to take longer to render because it's really big. Alright, still rendering. Let's go to Arnold render tab. Okay. The settings, the default settings, you know, let's go over the default settings. I'm gonna set this to 3. Okay. Ray depth, I'm gonna set it to 3, ignore that. Down here, diffuse at 1. Let's review. It's good to review because I went over this before in the previous tutorial, but it's just good to review. Alright, so it's rendering. These are the defaults. Again, while it's rendering on it. Okay, so it took 16 seconds at 1920 by 1080. Alright, let me move this over and let's save this. Okay, I saved it. Now I'm gonna move this over. I'm gonna pull this. I used the mouse scroll to pull back a bit. Let's hit 1:1. Now 1:1. Okay, we notice how it's jagged lines, right? The reason why is because this is anti-alias. Anti-alias is your AA. Your AA sample, so your camera shot, AA sample, anti-alias samples, right? Your camera anti-alias sample is set to 3. You could incrementally make this bigger and bigger and bigger, which is how you should do it when you're learning. But in my case, I know that if I set it to 7, it's just right. I don't want this tutorial to run longer than it should be, so you know, on your own you could go from 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, so you can check it out and see it yourself. Alright, so as you can see, it's rendering much nicer now. Obviously the render times is going to take longer. Previously it was 16 seconds. If you notice now, the lines should be a lot cleaner, much nicer. Huge difference. I'd say 7 is the acceptable good quality for, you know, portfolio quality. 7. Anything less, it's decent, but you could tell that it could be nicer. But 7 is just right. Anything more than 7, It's kind of waste of a time, but 7 is just right. So that's yeah, something you should know. Alright, so here's before, grainy, jagged lines. Now it's cleaning up much nicer. Alright, so that took from 16 seconds, a minute 23 seconds, so a lot longer. Let me save this, let me move this over, hit save. Next thing I highly recommend is your diffuse. Alright, your diffuse is just basically the color. It's gonna clean up here, here, and some of this here, some of this here. All this noise, it's gonna clean up. And I'm using the middle mouse button to navigate within our image render. And it's also gonna help clean up our reflections too. And hit 1 to 1. Okay, so diffuse, I'm gonna set it to 3. Specular, yeah, we can get into that after, but diffuse, set it to 3. And this too will also increase render times. But it's worth it for your demo reel. It's worth it. As you can notice, it's a lot cleaner already. Over here, you'll see it's a lot cleaner. The noise goes away. See? This is before, after, before, and if I let go of it, after, while rendering, much cleaner. Before, grainy, after, much cleaner. Before, after. So 3 is just right. Anything more, it gets cleaner and cleaner, but the render times does also get exponentially longer. So 7 and 3. The specular is down here. It'll clean it up too, but the render times will increase a lot. I mean, a lot. It's still rendering. Alright, much cleaner. So much nicer. Before, okay, after. So if I zoom in, this is before and after. See the difference? Huge difference. It also makes a difference. Let me save this. Alright, so before, after. The reason why I say it makes a huge difference is that when this is animated, the noise also animates too if you have a poor quality. But since we hammered out the noise in the still image, while it is in sequence, it should also make the noise go away. Alright, so before, after. Okay, so that took a minute 38. Alright, so for all the students, maximum your frame count, I'm assuming, should be about between 25 to 30 frames, maybe 35 frames, depending how much tweaking and changes you apply to your own animation, how long it is. So you could expect about a minute 38 or a minute 4 on the M1 computer max. Maybe it'll take about 2 minutes of render. So let's assume 30 frames for your sequence, 2 minutes a frame. So at 30 frames times 2 minutes a frame, that should be about 60 minutes. Okay, I'm assuming 2 minutes of render. So it's going to take about 1 hour to render your animation sequence. Okay, about 1 hour, maybe a little bit more. Let me also go over our specular. Specular has to do with your reflectivity down here. I want you to pay attention down here. Let's crank this to 3. You'll notice a huge difference, but also the render time should increase. So probably will take a solid 2 minutes on my computer. On the M1 chip, it should take about that long. Let's give it some time. A little bit more time. So the only drawback is that the render times does take longer, but it's necessary. The last thing you want to do is have animation and have poor render quality, because that's for sure it will be noticed in a bad way. When you create your own, start to compile your own demo reel, it just ruins everything when you have poor renders. Like it looks like really novice. Okay, so here comes the bottom part. Pay attention at the bottom part. Almost done. Alright, so wow, that took 2 minutes and 38 seconds. I also have this tutorial running, so it probably takes up more CPU, but so this is before. Hey, oh good. Alright, so if you zoom in, this is before, and when I let go, after. See how much cleaner? Let me go move this over. Jeez. Hit this button. Alright. Move this 1 to 1. Before. And I'm going to use the arrow, right arrow key. After. Before. After. We get the bottom screen here. Before. After. You see that? See how this part here is less, the graininess is more, instead of grainy, it's more blurry. Okay, so when you translate this to in the sequence, it'll look nicer. It won't look as noisy. It will look more like a blur, like how it should be. See, it's little things like this that makes a huge difference during the animation sequence. Okay, so that's that. Alright, so that was 2 minutes 38 seconds on your Mac computers. It could be maybe 3 minutes, maybe, I'm assuming. The M1 chips are pretty fast. So let's say 3 minutes times 30 frames, that's about 90 minutes. So hour and a half it should take. Alright. So yeah, 733. Don't mess with the transmission. That's something else different. I mean, the other thing is the diffuse. I explained before that the diffuse has to do with the bounce, like the bounce within this area, okay? But that's gonna crank your render times longer, and you're gonna have to sit and wait longer. And I mean, just for this tutorial, I want to explain diffuse. The specular is the bounce in terms of the reflectivity. In our tutorial, in this project, it won't make much of a difference. But the diffuse will. Let's just crank that to 2. You only need 2. In most cases, you're gonna need only 2, maybe 3 if the scene is really complex. So let's set this to 2 because you will see a huge difference. Yeah. But the render times will also increase a lot. So this should be our last and final render. So it's up to you. You could set your diffuse to 2 if you want, but minimum, I want your projects to set the diffuse to 1 minimum. You have to. I will not accept anything less than 1. You could set it to 2 if you're willing to be patient and sit through the additional render time. It'll probably set you back another 20 minutes, I'm assuming. Maybe 30 minutes, or set you back another 15 minutes total. I don't know. But you see, and within the shadow area, it's gonna have an additional bounce and make the scene lighter inside of here. So give it some more time. Alright, it's rendering.
It's on my life's like every note's like right steady quotes, quote the keys, knowing me and see me sees, and they injected me, touching the keys affecting me. It's something like telepathy, fuck it, but they neglected me. I feel the keys and then my fingers make them sing a song simultaneous, the pain in us to make them sing along.
Almost done.
Sometimes I'm feeling divine, sometimes I'm losing my mind. I freak the beat, the beat, the beat, the feet, the funk, the grind. I keep it rocking, never stop until the beat, y'all. We gon' take it to the top, so I keep y'all. I keep it rocking, never stop until the beat, y'all. Spin the riddle, stain it maybe. The grind for wealth is crazy, slightly unattainable. At times I doubt myself and I'm wondering if I'm capable. Too many stresses, little blessings, aggravations, half the nation.
Almost done. I don't know if you could tell, but before, after. See how much brighter it is? This is from your diffuse bounce, where the light hits the surface and it will bounce at least 1 time. Or 2 times. So the light comes in, it bounces off the surface, it hits the other adjacent surface, and then it bounces 1 more time. That's how it illuminates the crevices. Yeah. And also, if you look here, the reflection, it also updates the reflection because it's brighter. See? Not only that, but it bounces off the reflection too. Very high-tech stuff. This global illumination. Alright, so before, after. So that increased the render times by about 22 seconds, 23 seconds. Yeah, to 3 minutes. Alright, so it's up to you. So you could, it's not mandatory to make the diffuse at 2, but minimum at 1. Don't mess with the specular, it's not necessary. This minimal results. Just the diffuse. So overall, set to 7, 3, 3, okay, and diffuse at 1 minimum. 2 if you have some time to kind of see it through. Alright, so that's the end of this tutorial. This should be the final tutorial.